Now, our next speaker is one of the people who helped set up that petition, Chris Packham. We've heard, actually from every speaker really, that the shooters are not best pleased with the way that we're going about this and by the progress that we're making. 73,302 is a big number and they are rattled. So the RSPB's had a load of grief. Charlie Moore's has had a load of grief. I would say probably more than anybody else, Chris Packham has had a load of grief from these people. And he doesn't deserve it. And he's a lovely guy. And he's a very passionate campaigner and a very talented and knowledgeable naturalist. So over to you, Chris.
Thank you. Good morning. Was it afternoon? It's still morning. I need someone to help me. Would you give me a hand? Yeah, great, thanks. I know you're sat comfortably there in the sun, but you've got the appropriate hat, you see. Can you hold my sign for me? Yeah, no, not in front of the speaker. In fact, you could sit down if you like, because I'm going to rattle on for a little bit. But you're young. Actually, don't sit down. Stand up. Thank you so much for coming along to the start of our third Hen Harrier weekend. It's a fantastic event. I'm so pleased to see so many people here. And I'd like to thank you for being you. And I'd like you to pause for a moment to consider who you are. Because at the moment, I'm afraid to say that we are being made out to be something that we are not. And that mildly vexes me. Not to the extent that I lose any sleep over it, or even pause for too much thought, but something that I'd like to set right and be clear about. You see, the so-called Countryside Alliance call us animal rights activists. Now, as Charlie has admitted this morning, we are indeed activists. We're being active this morning. We've got out of our beds, set our alarms. Some people have driven quite a long way, and we're standing in a field. There is testament to our activism, but we are not animal rights activists. I remember animal rights activists. I think they showed their faces, or they didn't actually have balaclavas on most of the time, in the 70s and 80s, and they were releasing mink from fur farms, and they were breaking in and damaging property. In fact, they did some pretty unspeakable and terrible things, damaging graves. So, to rebrand us as animal rights activists is a little bit naughty, I think, really. Because when I look out here this morning, I don't see anyone in balaclavas. I don't see anyone who's likely to break in and damage property tonight at all. What I see in front of me are a group of concerned environmentalists and committed conservationists. That's what we are. We are conservationists. The Twitter trolls, well, there's plenty of them, and they have a lot to say. I always think it's worth listening to what people have got to say. We don't all have to share the same opinion. And we, of course, do listen to other people's opinions, and we change our own, which is very important. Very important. But they like to say that this is about politics, that this is about being left-wing or right-wing. This is about being Labour or Tory. I won't ask for a show of hands this morning. It's none of my business. But I can guarantee you that standing before me this morning, we have Labour voters, we have Tory voters, we've got UKIP voters. I don't know how far you've come. There might be SNP voters here for all of I know. And there may be people that don't vote at all because they feel so disenfranchised with our politics that they simply couldn't be bothered. So it's not about politics at all. It's about birds, plain and simple. So Twitter trolls, you're wrong about that, I'm afraid. They also like to say that it's about class. And here I would have some agreement with them, actually. But not in the way that they mean it. Not in the lower, middle and upper class context, but in the difference of class. The difference of class between a collective of people who want democratic, peaceful change through creative conservation, and the class of people who want to intimidate, insult and undermine the credibility of others. That's the class that we're talking about. That's what the issue is about there. The so-called BASC say that we're telling lies. This I struggle with, because they don't actually point out what the lies are that we're telling. It's difficult for them, you see, because we're not actually lying. What we are doing is using good scientific evidence to promote our cause. That's the foundation of our argument. We know that burning the uplands, burning the blanket bogs, contributes to climate change. We know that it causes erosion and damage to the soil structure. We know this because it's in published scientific papers that have been conducted through independent research. Not by the RSPB, not by me, not by the GWCT, but independent research. We know that draining these uplands leads to flooding downstream. Again, we don't need, that's not a lie, but there's all of the evidence written down to prove it. And for the people in Hebden Bridge, the evidence is still a stain mark on their wall. So we don't need to worry about that. And then, of course, if it's not about scientific research which is backing up our argument, it's about evidence. And the evidence is there and plain to see. Can anyone argue that earlier this year a man was seen setting pole traps on the Mossdale estate near Halls? I don't think so. It's caught red-handed. We've all seen the photographs. Can anyone argue that another man was seen setting out a decoy for hen harriers so that he could shoot at them? I don't think so. The evidence is there. Can anyone argue that the number of cases of trapping and poisoning and trampling of birds of prey isn't on the increase, or at least the recording of them? No. Just log on to social media, onto Facebook and Twitter, look at the photographs. Can anyone argue that just a few weeks ago on the Invercord estate in Scotland, that a series of 8 traps was found, set illegally, fen traps in the open, with rabbits lying alongside them, and a common gull trapped in one that needed to be humanely dispatched because, of course, it was dying in miserable agony? These are not lies. These are all out there in the public domain. We don't need to lie. We've got all the evidence and all the science that we need to back up our argument. It's that simple. But the Twitter trolls and everyone else, they are missing a trick. Because the one thing that we are is very, very definitely sexist. Because I'm looking out here today and I can't see a single female hen harrier. Everyone is waving a male around. No one. There's no feminist hen harrier supporters here. I think next year when we come, we need to show some redress there and some balance. Otherwise, we will be taken to, you know, the court of Twitter for being sexist. But that's about all they've got to go on, to be honest with you. Lastly, and perhaps most insidiously of all, the attempts to rebrand us include making out that this whole issue is controversial. That it's controversial. You see, when something becomes controversial, it becomes difficult to talk about. It becomes something that we have to manage, that we have to develop protocols to present. It means that there are restrictions as to what we can and can't say. What's controversial about criminal activity? If I drive here today in my car and I exceed 70 miles an hour, I'm a criminal. If I were campaigning along with all of you to say that people should stick to the speed limit, would that be controversial? I don't think so. Campaigning against the criminal abuse of our landscape through burning and draining and the removing of all of the predators and all of the mountain hares to produce this enormous, unsustainable crop of birds is not in any way at all controversial. Continuing to persecute our birds of prey by trapping and poisoning and killing them is not controversial in any way, shape or form. So attempts to rebrand us as animal rights activists, motivated by class and politics about a controversial subject, it's just pitiful squirming as we near the end of this issue. That's what it is. Hen Harrier Day for me now, in the space of, 3 years, has grown. I think our community is better ever than ever before to communicate and to share ideas and to gather strength and make progress. I don't think Hen Harrier Day is solely to do with hen harriers. I don't think it's solely to do with grouse anymore. I won't ask for a show of hands here today, but there will be people here who are equally concerned that lead ammunition is still being used, that 100,000 birds a year are dying in the UK because lead ammunition is being used. There will be people who are concerned that the Lead Ammunition Group's report was rejected. Good, independent science rejected again. There will be people here who are concerned, as Mike mentioned, about the plight of our waders. Now, the lapwing, the last time I checked, had declined by 56% in the last 25 years. And of course, the lapwing has become a conservation icon, not just for conservationists actually, but for a good number of land managers, for farmers. Farmers are proud to have lapwings on their field. They go to enormous lengths, some of them, to try and encourage these birds back. Because they're a charming, beautiful bird. And they've declined by 56%. But the snipe that Mike mentioned, in the space of 25 years, has declined by 89%. And yet, every year, they're shot. There's a disparity there for me. It's a bit odd. Turn one wader into a conservation icon, and the other one's still shot. Woodcock declined by 76%. Figures vary because of modes of measurement. Still being shot. You see, those sorts of things tie into this for me, because this is about standing up and saying, we want a new form of respect for the landscape which is ours, the landscape that we are living in, which our children may be living in or might be tomorrow, around gestations in the state of play. And we want a healthier, more sustainable landscape. It's about respecting that. And as Mike so pertinently put, respecting it starts with not being illegal, not continuing to kill our top of the food chain predators, which are there, obviously, to maintain some of that sustainability. And just to conclude, when I attended the first Hen Harrier Day, one of the Sodden 500, a couple of years ago, standing there, I drew upon my favourite Gandhi quote, which I often use, I have to say, overuse. He's a great man. He said, when you're fighting a campaign, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. Wow. As Mike pointed out, as Charlie mentioned, the shooting fraternity have been ignoring us for a long time. Rather like Mike, I was looking at hen harrier roosts in the New Forest and watched their numbers dwindle. I imagined, when I signed up to the RSPB and I'd read the magazine, that wildlife crime, poisoning raptors, putting them in pole traps was going to be something of the past. But I was standing here at age 55. I thought it would all be over. How naive I was, unfortunately. But at that point, there was no doubt that all of the efforts, all of the endeavour the RSPB and others put into liaising with that faction of the shooting fraternity came to nothing. But still they battled on. Credit to them. They signed up to the Hen Harrier Action Plan and said, OK, you haven't listened up until now, here's a plan, you've got to show willing. But they still ignored us. They still pulled the trigger, and the satellite tag birds just disappeared, yet still. That was the ignoring. I think it was pretty obvious that when we were all standing there in the rain, that they were laughing at us. I'd have been laughing at us, to be quite honest with you. It was a sorry scene. It was a sorry scene. All the gel washed out of my hair. I looked a complete mess. It was pitiful. It was laughable. Okay, they were laughing. But they're not laughing now. They're not laughing when there's 73,000 and we're going to get to the 100. We're going to get to the 100 because we're going to really push hard into this. We want that debate. We want the RSPB to be able to talk to politicians. We want public awareness to continue to grow. So they're fighting now, and they're fighting a bit dirty, but who cares? It's water off a duck's back, particularly if you're autistic and don't particularly care about what other people think of you. So don't worry about me. Because we nut jobs are about the hardest target that you've got. In fact, we're the worst target that you've got, because the more spite you pour on, the harder we work. I'll tell you why we're going to win, which is the last stage in Gandhi's quote, shall I? It's because we're conservationists, and we're using science and evidence to politely and reasonably request a positive change through democratic and peaceful means. Keep it up. Thank you very much.